And with that, I'm now happy to introduce Laura Jones, our Executive Vice President and Chief Strategic Officer. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Alexa, and welcome to everyone on the webinar. It's always wonderful to connect with you. And I also want to say a big welcome to my colleagues, Corinne, and I think we have Rachel Brendan is with us today, right? Brendan? Is it Brendan or Rachel who's with us today? It's Brendan. Brendan. Okay, it was Brendan who was with us today. Sorry, we've been a little bit running this morning, so we're Corinne and I joined kind of last. Thank you. And Corinne, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you.
So gang's all here, and we're happy to be with you right before the Thanksgiving weekend to update you on the latest and greatest and what's happening. For those of you who are new to these webinars, welcome. We've been running them for many weeks. We have quite a few regulars on the call, so but we'll try and make sure that we're not we're keeping you up to speed as well with what it is that we're doing. And so I'll go through some of my usual slides. Some of you have heard these before, but we do want to make really clear what our commitment is to you. Our commitment to you is that we will make sure that we're keeping our website up to date, and the questions that we get on these webinars are really, really valuable for that. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll just have that commitment up. And I think maybe we're having some slide challenges. I'll just give that a minute. Well, while we're working on changing the slide deck, I will tell you that our commitment is that we keep our website up to date and www.cfib.ca, and you will be able to get all of the information that you need. There you go. There's our website, and we answer as many questions as we can today, but if we don't get to your questions, you've got other avenues. So the frequently asked questions on the website, regularly updated, and also you've got our helpline and our very capable counselors like Brendan. So today you've got me and Corinne on the legislative side, and you've got Brendan who is on our helpline side, and together we try and kind of give you a picture of what's going on and what might be coming. So on the next slide, I always like to start these webinars with a few quotes, because at times like these, I think leaning on some of the wisdom outside of ourselves can be helpful and comforting. And so taking care of yourself makes you stronger for everyone in your life, including you. That's a good one, because that's really challenging when there's a lot to do and when there's a lot of stress. And Dr. Seuss, some good wisdom from Dr. Seuss. We've got a whole variety of people on this quote screen. Corinne helped with these. Always remember, you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think, and twice as beautiful as you've ever imagined, which that's a nice thought. And making it happen. Some people dream of success. Other people get up every morning and make it happen. I think just sometimes taking the little steps every day is so important. And then, of course, Martin Luther King giving us a good anchor here. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. I think that's also a very nice thought. Okay, and with that, let's get to our key topics today. What's new, what's next, and your questions. There's not as much new this week as there has been in previous webinars that we've done, but one thing there are lots of new rumors flying out there about what's coming, particularly with respect to that rent relief piece. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And our advice for those of you who are new to these webinars, keeping a journal at this time is one of our best pieces of advice, just to kind of jot down what's going on in the business and things that you might forget, and decisions that you've made, conversations that you've had. We know many people have told us that's been a helpful thing to do, and it's never too late to start that. So with that, we'll go to, I think we're going to our dashboard. So after the last webinar, somebody said, what about the dashboard? Where did the dashboard numbers go? So I'm bringing the dashboard back for everybody to see. This is our small business recovery dashboard. These are the key indicators that we are looking at, and we are getting out to the media on small business recovery. Of course, there are other things we look at as well, but this is sort of gives us a good temperature of where things are at. Again, 30% back to normal sales, about 42% of you back to normal staffing, and 70% of you are now fully open. So that means if you had reduced hours or reduced availability, you're open again. Obviously not where we'd like to see these numbers. One comment I will make about the normal sales is that when we ask this question on the survey, there's different categories that we give, and then this is just that how many are in that last final category of at or above normal sales. What we are observing is that more people are going up from below 50% of normal to into that kind of up to 75% category. So, that is something, but we also know in parts of the country, I was in Toronto just yesterday, we were at a food court, an independent restaurant there who said normally his business is 250 customers a day, down to 20, and now with the fear of the second wave that's particularly strong in Ontario, he was down to 10. So we know that in parts of the country, it's kind of moving back because of the health concerns around what's going on. But this is what our snapshot is telling us. If we go to the next slide, one of the other recent questions that we asked that we provided intel into Freeland's office on is the need for rent relief. And so you can see from this slide that the majority of those that need rent relief are saying that this is going to significantly or marginally increase the odds of staying open. So this has been part of the case that we have been making to the federal government around the need to get a new program in place. And I just share these results because many of you do fill out our surveys, and I want you to know that those surveys are giving you a direct voice into government. That's why CFIB started 50 years ago, is to make sure you have a voice in the public policy matters that affect you. And this is an example of how we do that. So if we move on to the next slide, I think, Corinne, this is where you might want to take over because we're starting to talk about the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. And again, this good example of some of the survey questions we ask and getting them into government. So I'll pull you in at this point, and I'll be back when you need me in a minute.
Great. Again, good afternoon or good morning. So this is, again, a survey that we did that Laura mentioned, where we ask our members around a whole series of questions, including on the throne speech. And as part of the throne speech, the government, as you may recall, announced that they are going to extend the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy through to next summer. And they're going to extend the Canada Emergency Business Account to help businesses with fixed costs. And so we wanted to understand whether this was a good news sort of story to small businesses or not. And as you can see, both of these measures help bring some more confidence to business owners. Now, neither have been actually put into action or been executed on yet, but just knowing that these things are coming, I think has been helpful in building some confidence among many small business owners out there. So that's what this is really about. And that's what this slide is telling us. If we move to the next slide, you'll see what's new. And so I may bring Laura back a little bit, because the first what's new we wanted to talk about is some tweets that Minister Freeland did actually right after our webinar last week. So we weren't able to sneak it in. But maybe I'll have you talk a little bit about why these tweets are important.
So, what's going on here, if you look at it on the surface, is there's some clear signaling happening. And this signaling that something is coming on rent relief is causing the rumors to really start to fly, including there was some reporting, some BNN story around this, Corinne, and then there's another story in the Globe based on the BNN story. We were quoted in those stories. And you know, their office has reached out to us for information. That's another signal that something is coming, and they're kind of, they've been pretty clear that they're talking to business groups. So we don't know exactly what or when, but what we do know is it looks like something is, I would be surprised if something wasn't coming soon. And if I were in a politician's shoes, I might want to do that heading into Thanksgiving. That's a nice timing. But again, we don't know exactly when, and I always say you can't take hope to the bank, but this is looking more and more hopeful. So that's, I think, kind of what we can say about that, Corinne. And there's another one that's looking more and more hopeful, where there's some noise out of British Columbia as well that I'll mention in a minute.
Yeah. So the other thing that happened this week, though, which was more concrete, is that the government did announce that they were adding $600 million more in funding to the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, or what we know as the RRRF. These are the funds that are distributed through the regional development agencies, RDAs. So if you go to the next slide, this is a list of the various regional development agencies. I know it's really difficult to read. It is in part of the handout, so and it's got links in it, so you may want to go there if you're interested in learning more. This was originally announced back in May. They had about almost $1 billion then that was distributed among these 6 development agencies across Canada. The focus of the relief fund is really meant for those businesses who are not able to get help in any other means, either through the wage subsidy program or through the Canada Emergency Business Account program, or falling through the cracks in some regard. For example, I know many businesses that have over that 1.5 million in payroll weren't able to access CEBA. They have been able to access some funding potentially through these guys. Some of them are designed the same way as CEBA. They're $40,000 loans with about 25% forgivable. Others have different forms that they're using. They use maybe just as loans, or even people who may need more money. Some of them do offer that as well. It really depends on the regional development agency that you find yourself in. They are divided by region, so Atlantic Canada has their own called the ACOA, Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, and then there's a couple in Ontario, FedNor and FedDev, one for Southern Ontario, one for Northern Ontario. There's one in Quebec, and then there's one in Western Canada, Western Economic Diversification, that covers from Manitoba to BC, and there's one for the Northern Territories. So those are the 6 different development agencies. You have to go to the one in which your business is located to find out more information. But the links are part of the handout, so please go ahead if that is something you're interested to learn more about. Or if you have questions, please try us here. We'll certainly try to answer them. If not, there's also calling our helpline, and they'll help you through that. In the original version of this as well, there were definitely differences between the various development agencies and how well prepared they were. We're hopeful they now have worked out the kinks. So if you are going to apply through them, but they'll now be able to do it a bit more efficiently than they did it in the first round. But you never know. Some were better than others in getting that money out the door. So, but definitely there is more money in the system again through these development agencies. So go to the next slide. Also wanted to let you know, we've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, but the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit and the Canada Recovery Caregiver Benefit are now available for people to apply for. And just a reminder, the sickness benefit provides $500 per week for up to a maximum of 2 weeks. And it's for those who are unable to work for at least 50% of their work week because they got sick with COVID-19, they were ordered to isolate, or they have an underlying condition that increases their risks of getting COVID-19. All of these, though, you have to have some sort of authority say that you must do these things or have to do these things. So that's what that's around for. It also cannot be overlapped with the employer. If the employer pays for the sick leave, then they cannot take this in addition to that. They have to use the employers first, and then they can jump on this if that runs out and they still need some help. The second is the caregiver benefit, also provides up to $500, or does provide $500 per week for up to 26 weeks. And this is to give caregivers of children under the age of 12 or dependent adults who require supervised care when their schools or day programs have been shut down or reduced capacity due to COVID-19. So on this one, you can't just choose to take your child out of school and then stay home and collect this. If the school is still open, the child has to go to school. So it has to be that the school has been actually shut down, or a portion of the school or the class has been shut down as a result, and that you have to stay home with the child. So that is what that purpose of that one is for. The biggest one, though, is the Canada Recovery Benefit, which also may be of interest to many folks who are self-employed, who may have been on the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and now want to transition to this because they're not eligible for EI, are still waiting to hear about when this is going to be available. This is going to be available as of next Monday, so October 12th. The applications are supposed to be available. There is a lot of information now up on the CRA website if you want to learn a bit more. There is some more information that they have now provided on how this works. It is going to run a bit more like an EI program. You will have to apply every 2 weeks in order to continue to get it, and it is $500 per week going forward as well. It should be available until sometime next year. As well, there's a maximum amount to it as well. So there are quite a few other rules around it that we can certainly share with you that I have shared in previous weeks, and happy to share again if you need it. Just ask us some questions or give us a call. But the CRA website is pretty good right now too in terms of giving that information, given that they're going to start accepting applications next week. On to the next slide. On the provincial side, there's actually been a little bit more activity than at the federal side. Given, of course, some uptick in COVID cases, especially in Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, lesser degree the last week or so in BC, but still in BC as well. Two provinces, Quebec and Ontario in particular, have started to do a bit more. Quebec, of course, has designated red zones, which we talked about last week, which is Montreal, Quebec City, and an area south of Quebec City. And then where they've actually ordered restaurants and nightclubs to close. They've also since then banned team sports and asked gyms to close in those particular red zones. But in addition to that, they've actually done something we'd like to see other governments do as well, is that they've actually announced a new program called the Assistance for Business in Regions Under Maximum Alert, which allows those businesses who have had a drop in revenue to get a loan through one of two programs that have already existed since the beginning of the COVID pandemic in Quebec. That's but now those businesses in the red zones that have been forced to close can now apply further if they've gotten that loan to get much of it, to get relief on that loan. Up to 80% of that loan could be forgiven to a maximum of $15,000 per month. So that is one of the things that the Quebec government has done to try to help those businesses through this period. And also some interesting news out of Quebec as well is that the City of Montreal has actually announced they will freeze property taxes for 2021. It's the first city that we're aware of in the country that has, our major city at least, that has said that they will do that. I know most other cities are planning to go ahead with property tax increases for next year. So that is an interesting development that we'll certainly use to see if we can push other cities to do the same. Next slide. A little bit on the Ontario front as well, which has also been hit by a growing number of COVID cases. Last week, they did announce that every employee must now be screened prior to arriving at work. There is a bit of a questionnaire that every employee has to go through every single time they come into work on a daily basis. We have a couple offices in Ontario. We've had to now incorporate this into our regime as well. So it's something that you should be aware of if you have employees coming into your workplace. They are requiring masks in all public indoor spaces now across the province. This was the case in some cities, but now is everywhere. And in the hot spots, which are considered Toronto, Peel, and Ottawa, so they're red zones in Quebec, they're hot spots in Ontario. There are some limits. They haven't closed anything, but they are limiting some of the activities that can be done in terms of the number of people that can be in these particular establishments. And you have a list of them there on the screen. Similar to Quebec, though, there was some announcements on ways to help. They did announce just yesterday in Ontario that they're going to have a one-time personal protective equipment grant of up to $1,000 for businesses with 2 to 9 employees in the hardest hit sectors. That's what they consider hardest hit, or retail, hospitality, and some other service sectors. And the applications for that are supposed to start in early November. So that's something to look out for if you're in Ontario. They also announced yesterday that Ontario will permanently allow licensed restaurants and bars to include alcohol with food takeout orders. This was a temporary measure for COVID to help out, and they've now said that this will be a permanent measure going forward. To the next slide. I also wanted to remind folks, we've been talking about tax deferrals in the past. At the end of September, most provincial and federal tax deferrals came to an end. So that means that taxes are now expected to be paid and interest will now accumulate in many different types of taxes. At the federal level, pretty much all of them now are back to their normal sort of payment schedule. The list you have here are the list of those provincial tax levies that are still being deferred. So the exception is now there's a lot fewer of them now being deferred. So if it's not on this list, it's likely that you'll have to be now paying it. You'll see there's a couple in Manitoba. There's one in Alberta, one in Quebec, and one in PEI that is still on the deferral list. So we do have a full list in the appendix of the actual presentation that you have. If we go to the next slide, we want to talk a little bit about what's next. And this is, again, something that we've been talking about every week. We know that many of you are very eager to hear more about some of the things that have been sort of implied, either through a throne speech or through Prime Minister talking or through tweets from the Finance Minister. But these are the things we're still expecting to hear announcements on. First and foremost, Laura already touched on, is some new program to address rent relief. That is the one that we're hopeful is pretty imminent. However, we just don't know when. The fact is that extending the Canada Emergency Business Account to personal bank accounts is still outstanding. We were on a call this morning, myself and Dan Kelly, our president, with Export Development Canada that administers this to find out more where all this is at. They're working on it. They say they continue to work on it. It's still part of the plan, but it just seems crazy that people have been waiting essentially 2-3 months now for this particular program to get put together. And so we continue to increase the pressure dramatically on government to do something around this, given how long it's been since they first announced they would extend the CEWS program to those with personal bank accounts. So if any of you are out there, all I can do right now is ask for your patience, but at the same time, please tell us your stories, because that really helps us get that message into government and really put the pressure on them to move more quickly in getting this particular, probably longest outstanding piece out there.
Just a comment, Corinne, that there were some questions about CEWS and whether there was any news. And again, it's another piece that there are rumors flying around. But at this point, it's rumors, nothing concrete that we know. But it's really clear that for those with personal bank accounts, it's a technical problem on the government's end, like their systems being able to handle the applications and figuring out the back end that is getting in the way. And as we said last week, I mean, that's little comfort to those that need the money now, except that at least you're not wondering whether they intend to do it or not. It's just that they're really struggling on their back end, which is it's still a challenge. It's a different challenge.
And I know that there's a lot of folks that are worried because the deadline to apply for the CEWS is October 31st, and we're now in October. And so I know that that's also a big concern, is that you're waiting to get this personal bank account option, but there's only like 3 weeks left before you can apply. I can say with 95% confidence that it's likely they will extend that deadline, at least for those with personal bank accounts at this point in time, just because they know it's not enough time for folks to apply. I would think it would be extended for all, but I can't guarantee that piece of it. But I would like to assure those with personal bank accounts that I don't think they can realistically at this point introduce a program and expect everyone to apply by the end of the month. Because I know that's a big worry for many people. And in fact, I would say that people in government sort of nod their heads and say that they kind of get that that's something that they'll have to do something about because they've waited so long.
And I can probably say with about 100% confidence, Corinne, that our president, Dan Kelly, who's been really pushing on this file, and I know a lot of people on Twitter are following him. He's got a little bit of there's a group of people who are really worried about this, that he, I think we can say with 100% confidence that he would light his at least proverbial hair on fire if they didn't extend the deadline. He's been very active on this particular file. And so we can say with 100% confidence we'll do everything we can to make sure that deadline isn't an obstacle for people.
Yeah. However, if you're not waiting for that and you still haven't applied for CEWS and you're eligible, I would strongly encourage you to get in now because there is only 3 weeks left. We did have a call with Export Development Canada this morning, as I said. Their call centers are a little better managed. It's still not great, but it's better than it was. And it's only a callback system now, so you can only leave your name and number and they're going to call you back, but they are calling back people, they said, within 2 to 3 days now. So that is better than it was. And they will call you back up to 3 times. If they don't catch you the first time, they will try again another 2 times. So don't feel like if you miss it the first time, they have to call them immediately, do it again. They will try and call you back a few times. But so that's, I think, small reassurance, but things are improving there a little bit as well.
And of course, we don't know if they do expand the amount of the CEWS loan. We don't know what that new deadline might be. So it's a little bit confusing because there's the existing CEWS, there's the CEWS for those with bank accounts that has yet to come, and there's the possibility of an expansion, which again, there's a lot of rumors flying around, was indicated in the throne speech, and we just don't know yet, but we're kind of, one thing I will tell our listeners is that like CFIB staff are monitoring, like we're like looking every few minutes to see, because we're waiting, like we think there might be something soon. So we don't know, but we're certainly on red alert right now ourselves.
We are absolutely on red alert. And just on CEWS as well, I mean, there are, it gets confusing because there's the original CEWS with payroll, then there's a second CEWS, which is out there for those with non-deferrable expenses who do not have payroll. And then, of course, we're now waiting for the personal bank account. And then the fourth version, of course, will be this expansion of CEWS, which we don't know how much they're going to expand it by or when it's going to happen, or if they're going to increase the forgivable portion or not. So those are all things that are question marks still, but we are expecting something around those. And finally, I'll say that the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy is to be extended into next summer, but we don't know any details yet still on that one. My sense is government is focused right now on fixing, on getting the CEWS expand, and fixing the rent relief piece of this, and then dealing with CEWS, and then they're probably going to get to the wage subsidy part of it. Now, if they're going to do all that quickly, I don't know. I'm hopeful. We're pushing them. As you can see on the bottom half of the slide, there are many things we're still pushing for as we go through these discussions with government and pushing these new programs out. One, of course, on the wage subsidy is to slow down the decline or even increase the amount of wage subsidy that was already planned. So as you may recall, the wage subsidy is meant to become less and less generous as we get closer to December. And given the fact they're pushing it out now to next summer, and given the fact that it looks like we're moving into a second wave or are in a second wave in some parts of Canada, that we need to sort of pull back on that decline and that we need to keep that wage subsidy at a higher amount if we're going to actually encourage businesses to hold on to their employees and keep people employed through this really difficult period that we may be entering into in some parts of Canada. So that's been a big push for us in the last couple of weeks alone, is let's stop the decrease. Let's maintain it or even increase it for the next few months. And then let's figure out what that looks like from December into next summer. So that's a big one for us. The other piece of that that's still a big issue for some is the fact that the dividend income is not included in the wage subsidy. Don't think the government will ever allow full dividend income to be included, but we're potentially trying to push them to allow at least a portion of it to be included because it is such an important source of income for many small business owners. And we want to see CEWS expanded in other ways. For example, can it be given, is there some way that we can include people who have less than $40,000 in non-deferrable expenses? Because I know for some it's been difficult with the rules around the non-deferrable expenses right now to get some of their expenses included. So there's two parts to that. It's either allowing people with less than $40,000 in non-deferrable expenses to access the loan, or to do something to allow more things to be included in the current rules that are out there. And I know one of the biggest caveats that a lot of people are running into is the fact that you have to have a contract in place by March 1st in order for it to be eligible to be part of your non-deferrable expenses. And we've been pushing back a lot on that. And so we're hopeful as part of the changes coming on the Canada Emergency Business Account that some of those issues will be addressed. We also know that brand new businesses or businesses that were created in the last 9 months are not able to access the CEWS loan either. So those are some of the areas that are still definitely gaps in the system. The last piece I'm going to mention, but we're still pushing for, is, as you know, there were many changes made to EI as to allow more people to transition from the Canada Emergency Response Benefit into the EI system. This was important to do on a temporary basis in order to help people through the COVID emergency. Our concern and what some of the messages we're getting is that some of these changes may become permanent, which we believe shouldn't be done in the time of a pandemic. We believe these need to be temporary only, and then we need to have proper consultation and discussion. We need to do proper analysis of what this actually means before we make further decisions that actually makes these changes permanent. And that kind of consultation needs to be done with employers and workers who pay for the system. And if it just gets done automatically, then that sort of defeats what that whole system was set up to do. And so we're pushing strongly not to make any of these measures permanent without any kind of consultation. So that's a big one for us right now, because the potential costs to the system are huge if they go ahead with some of the changes right now in a more permanent way. And so we want to make sure we're really thinking about that before it happens. So I think that's it on my end. I think it's, go to the next slide, please. I think it's back to you, Laura, for one last. Oh, where'd you go, Laura? There you are.
I'm here. I'm just pushing buttons too fast. Okay, so we're going to get to your questions in just a minute, and got some great questions. So, but I just want to remind everyone that our Small Business Every Day campaign is out there. Download, those posters, and we're really trying to create this movement around conscious consumerism and making that choice to go with independent business when you have those choices. We've got more to come. We just got some exciting news actually that we've got a new thank you contest that we're going to run that I think will really encourage people to shop local, and we're going to be running that right up through Small Business Saturday, which we've moved to November now to coincide with that Black Friday weekend. And so we've got more coming on this. We've got some of our partners have been great. Scotiabank is one of our partners, and they're looking at having, I support local stickers in all their branches. And so we're really trying to amp up this movement to support independent business. And so check out that Small Business Everyday website. We've got these tools, or if you want to talk to your local district manager, they can bring you a poster if you want one. So just another little push on that campaign, and more to come. We've got some exciting new plans for the fall. I know many of you have asked me about what else are we doing to promote local shopping, and so that's a big part of what we're involved in right now, as well as advocating on your behalf. So on the next slide, this is our resources, and so this is the point in the webinar where we're going to go to your questions, and I will invite Corinne and Brendan come back on the screen. And while they are coming up and help me answer your questions, I'll start with a few. They've got some. I'll take one, Corinne, because we've got two, both Tasha and there was another question on what pressure we're putting on BC political parties since we're in an election, and there was another comment about how BC hasn't done very much, and yeah. Jimmy was saying BC is way below in help to small business, ongoing election, what's happening with financial help. And it's timely actually, because I had a long conversation with one of the BC deputies earlier this week on what's happening with their program, because they actually have something that would provide some decent help, but they don't have an application open yet. And Brendan, you might want to weigh in on this too, because you talk to BC members regularly. So they have a $30,000 grant, $40,000 for tourism industry for those who have been hard hit. So there's a revenue loss criteria in there of 50%. You've got to have a viable business plan going forward. But like many of the other programs, the applications aren't open yet. And I think a lot of our members are worried that the election, because there's an election, that nothing will happen. But what we do know is that although typically during an election period there wouldn't be much going on, anything that has been approved by cabinet in BC can still go forward. And so again, this is another one where the rumors are flying, where we're getting more calls from the deputy and briefings. And so my guess is that this is coming soon. We don't have an exact date, but we are kind of on red alert in BC for you BC members to get you that information out. And if you're not in BC, this is still relevant for you in a way, because often what we do is if there's a program that works really well in one province, we'll look at trying to get it to the other provinces. And it's a fairly big grant relative to some of the others. We've seen $30,000 and then $40,000 for those in tourism. Brendan, I don't know if you want to say anything else about that, but for you members in BC, I don't think you're going to have to wait until the election is called for the applications to be open. And again, it's one that we're on red alert kind of watching.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. And very briefly, we agree with that comment that we feel very much that BC provincial government has kind of dropped the ball in terms of supporting small businesses. And that's something we're really been pushing hard for and pushing hard for those supports to get in place now, because certainly that $30,000 or $40,000 grant, it sounds great. And we know as soon as we heard it, we weren't dancing on the table, so we jumped up and we were pretty excited. But the lack of details that have been issued right now and the lack of an application date is certainly concerning. So that's our prerogative right now, is to really push hard to get that application process open and get the money into the hands of those businesses that so badly need it. I mean, yeah. I'm not going to make any further comment in regards to our feelings about how slow things have gone here, but we're working really hard to get that out there right now, and feel this could be a good boost to those sectors that really badly need the help.
So Corinne, here's a comment for you from Leslie. As a person in tourism, I've lost 95% of my income this year and am unable to pay my HST or income tax. Is there any way CFIB could consider asking the government to at least back off the interest, especially for tourism businesses that haven't had any much business this year? I think that's a great suggestion. So just wanted to flag that with you and see what your thoughts were.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things on that. One is in the throne speech, the federal government did say that they were planning on providing extra relief for the hardest hit businesses, of which tourism was singled out as one of the key sectors that they are planning to provide some extra relief. Again, don't know when that's going to happen or what it's going to look like. However, in the interim, my recommendation for you would be to talk to CRA. They will likely provide you with a bit of a leeway there and probably not be charging you interest. And ask for taxpayer relief. There's a form you need to fill out, I think, Brendan, right, in order to do that.
And Corinne, Heather is asking about what's going on with EI and CPP premiums for 2021.
Well, both of them we actually kind of know already. EI premiums are going to be frozen until 2023, so that won't change. So that's the good news. However, when 2023 comes, they will be going up. CPP, however, is going to be going up. We've been pushing government hard on trying to defer what we know are our planned CPP increases that have been in the works now for a few years. As you may know, we've seen a couple of increases already in the last 2 years. 2021 was actually supposed to be the biggest increase yet, unfortunately, and everything we're hearing is telling us they're going to go ahead with those increases on January 1 for CPP. So that's the bad news. We're going to continue to push them to at least defer it for a year or two until we get out of this, because the last thing you want to do is increase the cost of employment, which is exactly what happens when you increase payroll tax like CPP. But right now, as of today, it's our understanding it's going to be going up on January 1st. And then I think it's going to be going up around 25 cents per $100. I'm not sure. I have to look at the exact number, but I know it's one of the bigger increases that we've seen.
Okay, so Lori is hoping, sticking with the tax theme, Corinne or Brendan, but I'll maybe go to Corinne first on this one. Sticking with the tax theme, she's hoping for some clarity on some conflicting information she's heard about tax remittances. And she had heard that on the corporate tax, they'd only had to remit their September installment and not the installments from April to September. But she's also heard exactly the opposite of that. So is it all of the installments from April to September that are due, or is it just the September installment, or is that something we're going to have to look into in order to ensure we're giving clear advice?
So I'm assuming it's some form of federal tax that she's talking about.
Tax,
yeah. If it's corporate tax, I think it all has to be filed and paid by end of September. And again, like we mentioned with the previous question, if you have trouble paying it, call CRA, tell them about your situation, and they may very well give you an extension one-on-one in that regard through taxpayer relief, because they have told us they will be more open to that given the COVID situation and the fact that they know many businesses are struggling right now. So that would be my only suggestion to you, is to make that call to CRA.
Brendan, anything to add to that?
No, that covers my thoughts and my understanding exactly.
Mm-hmm. So I've got a question from Carlo on CECRA that I'll take, which is, the question about, and I apologize, Carlo, I should have covered this one. I should have said what we're looking for in the rent relief program when we cover that off. But he's asking about whether the program will still be in the hands of the tenant and not, or whether it's going to just the tenant or the landlord. Of course, nothing's been announced yet, so we don't know. But my strong, somewhat informed guess is that I believe that they're not going to double down on the way the program worked in the first place, which was to go through the landlord. I believe they're going to get the relief. Any relief program is going to go straight to the tenant. I would be very surprised if they went any other road. I think all of the advice that are being given certainly from us, from other business associations, from many of you, is that we need to get the rent relief directly in the hands of the tenant to keep things much simpler and cleaner for both the landlord and the tenant. And the program wasn't working from either perspective before. It was putting both in a difficult situation. So, Carlo, that's my best guess. I would be very, very surprised if they did it any other way. Of course, do governments do dumb things sometimes? Yes, they do. So it's possible, but I don't think it's probable. Okay. Do you, Corinne, do you and Brendan, I've got piles more questions, but I know you've been looking at your questions as well. So I want to give you a chance. Maybe Brendan, I'll go to you first to see if there's a question in your inbox that you want to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Laura. And it's not a question, it's actually a whole avalanche of questions from our Ontario members in regards to the morning questionnaire that has to be filled out that you have to do with your workers. I guess there's been questions saying, do we have to do it each morning? How do we have to do it? Does it be in paper? How long do we have to keep the documents for? These are all fabulous questions. And thankfully, we do have some answers for you in this regard. So the answer is yes. Unfortunately, it does add red tape to your life because you do have to do it every single morning with your workers. Now, it can be done digitally. This means that you can go through the checklist, or they can go through the checklist and send you the results via email. We've even heard text messages acceptable, but you do have to have record in case you're audited by the Provincial Health Authority, though they're going to want to see that you have these in place, and you do need to retain these records for at least 30 days following the date that it was actually administered to. So it's a necessary evil at this point. We're hoping to, help ease the red tape burden a little bit. So we're continuing to work with government on that. But for now, it has to be done on a daily basis. You do have to retain those records, though it can be done digitally. That's it for me for now. I'm going to keep going through my questions. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Brendan. I just got a quick one from Ryan that I'll answer on is there a website badge or something that we can put on our sites for the thank you, the Small Business Everyday thank you campaign? And yeah, absolutely. Just go to smallbusinesseveryday.ca and it says I'm a business owner. It's a very easy website. I'm a business owner, and there's tools, there's posters, there's badges you can put on your digital, badges for websites. And the thing is, the more business owners we have using these tools, the bigger we feel that we can make this movement around shopping local. We actually just have some survey results back saying there's about 24% kind of awareness of the campaign among business owners, and so that's pretty good given we've only just we've had it going for a couple months, but we're really ramping up in the fall. But that I think is important to show consumers that it's needed. So thank you, Ryan, for asking the question. Corinne, any questions you want to get to?
So yeah, there's a number of them. I'm just trying to go through to see if there's some themes happening. Lots of questions on both CEBA and the wage subsidy. I did want to, a couple of them, I did answer one, but I think it's one that may be of interest to others as well. Stephanie was asking around First of all, she thanked us for Team CFIB, so thank you on behalf of Stephanie. She said the shop qualifies for government help for the month of August, but not in September, and wants to know if the deeming rule is still helping out for the better month following a scary month. We need to qualify for each month that we apply for. And the good news, Stephanie, is in the new rules, you can actually apply, you can actually use either the current month or the previous month when calculating your revenue loss drop. It's just part of the calculation now. They kind of got rid of the deeming rule, but they kind of incorporated it into the actual calculation now. So when you go through the online calculator to calculate the amounts, there will be an opportunity in there to either use your revenue from the previous month or the current month. And so that is how they sort of got rid of the rule, but kept it in spirit on the online calculator. So you can still use the previous month in order to get a subsidy for the current month as well. I also want to address something Angela was asking about, and she was asking about any news on the wage subsidy and the CSJs, which is the Canada Student Job Grants, double dipping, which seems to be allowed. So Angela, we have since had confirmation that it is allowed, and the reason it's allowed is because you actually pay the student up front and then get the money from the government later. And because you're paying up front, that's then seen as a wage that you're paying to an employee, and the government will provide you a subsidy for that. And the grants become sort of extraordinary monies that come after the fact. So we've had that confirmed now from CRA. So you are allowed to both get the Canada Student Job Grant and use the wage subsidy for those. If the only time it doesn't happen is when the government pays the employee directly, then you can't use that. But because you're paying them first and then getting the money back later, you are able to double dip on that particular program. So that's good news for anybody who were able to get into the Canada Student Job Grants, which wasn't easy, I know, this year for many.
I've got one from Adam on another one on rent relief and whether we're hearing it will be extended to next summer as the wage subsidies have been, and we're not hearing what the timeline is. We do expect that it will be extended at least through the fall. What we've been saying is extended at least through the fall and longer for businesses who need it. So we're not sure what time frame is going to be put around that, but I would be surprised if they didn't, I would be very surprised if they went with a month-to-month approach, the way they've been doing from, for September and August and July. I think they're going to move away from that, would be my best guess. Again, that is a guess at this point. Corinne, there was a comment actually about, let me see if I can find it, about feeling left behind because they're in the kind of trade show business. And often when we talk about the hard hit sectors, it's, we talk about restaurants and tourism, and there's a whole bunch of members who are in the convention or event planning space. And I know we've been trying to talk a little more about those members, and I'm sure you do that when you're talking to government, but maybe you can just address that.
Yeah, so we sort of define folks in the trade show space and other event spaces, as you said, as the sort of our arts recreation group, which is along with hospitality, the hardest hit. And again, the government in its throne speech identified tourism, hospitality, and arts, performing arts, and other sort of related types of events as the areas that they plan to do more in order to help out. Again, don't know what that looks like or what it means, but my suspicion is that there will likely be some sort of specific grant program that will be sort of targeted to those types of businesses that have pretty much been shut down through this whole thing. And that's definitely an area we have focused on too, and we've been sort of reminding government that, I mean, our data, as Laura showed earlier, is that 30% of businesses are back to normal revenue. That means 70% are not. And then there's still a proportion of businesses that are still way below that, way below like 20% or 30% of their revenue. And so we're reminding governments constantly of the need to make sure that there's something there for them. And as they start to wean people off, or they have only one-time grants that were supposed to only last for 3 or 4 months, and now we're in month 7, that we need to continue to remind them that something needs to be done to help those businesses through a challenging period that they did not cause. That was something that was imposed on them. And so it's only fair for us to make sure that we're supporting them through this tough period.
Do we have any sense of where they can turn for, Brian is asking from that trade show industry, is there any place they can turn for additional support at this point? I feel like a lot of the provincial governments are just starting to come up behind the hard hit industries, and the attention is kind of starting to slowly shift to, okay, what are we going to do for those businesses that are really hard hit?
Yeah, so I would suggest, yeah, definitely provincial. I think a lot of them are focused on tourism, and I think you could argue that the trade show space is part of the tourism industry. The new money that went to the regional recovery and relief funds. If you haven't tried your regional development agency, I don't know what part of Canada you're in, you may want to give them a call and see if there's something there that could potentially help as well. So I mentioned I had that really ugly slide that you could barely read up on the screen, but again, you have the handout there that you hopefully can link in there and hopefully get some more information from the regional development agency, as to whether or not they can help. The final is the loans. Go to your bank. BDC and EDC are both providing guaranteed loans through the bank system, both of which is supposed to be improved. These are things the throne speech also implied. So they're not as good because they're loans, but they are at least something to maybe help you get through the tough times if you're able to get them.
Brendan, do you just want to repeat for Linda? She says she's late to the party, and she heard about the on the radio, the $1,000 grant for PPE, for personal protective equipment in Ontario. We had another question on this as well, about whether it will be only for PPE going forward or going back. My guess is we don't know that yet. Do you want to just repeat what's going on with the $1,000 grants, what we know and what we don't know for the Ontario grants?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Laura. We wish we knew more, as all the cases with these programs. But yeah, currently it's $1,000 towards PPE. As Laura stated, we don't know if it's going to be ongoing or backdated as well. But we do know that those businesses who are qualified right now to collect that can do so. Now, I should mention that those businesses must have between 2 and 9 employees. So unfortunately, it does shut out a lot of the medium-sized members that we do have right now. And of course, we're lobbying the government right now to expand that a little bit further, because everybody needs that support right now. So that's about as much as we know at this time. We're obviously pushing for more details to be made available as soon as possible. But I do advise you to check in not only on our weekly webinar or call business resources, but also to bookmark our websites, www.cfib.ca/COVID-19. We do update that in real time as well, and we'll make sure that as soon as we know more, that we'll enter it there too. So yeah, don't hesitate to call us, but always do tune in as well.
Thanks, Brendan. And I'm going to try to get to a few more questions. We typically go a little bit over for those of you who are new, just to get to as many questions as we can for those of you that are holding on the line, but we'll try and take them kind of quickly now. So Corinne, quick comment that I think I would be interested to know if others have the same feeling. I know I certainly do, but Barbara's making the comment that, is there any way to get the schools to understand they can't just expect parents to leave their jobs every time a child burps? I'm having a real problem with my employees in that regard, and I sympathize with the schools and the parents, but it's getting a bit much. And I know a lot of schools have policies like you have to pick up your kid within 30 minutes if there's a runny nose. I don't know if you're hearing about that on the phone line, Brendan, but certainly something I think that we can do some work on, Corinne, in terms of on the advocacy side. It's a helpful comment. Brendan, any other comments to add to that?
Yeah, so I mean, on that side, that's obviously a very difficult lobbying initiative because of the public optics of it. That said, actually, and this is very timely, is in our last e-newsletter, we actually did write an article about that, the VR Business Resources Department, in regards to workplace planning, and workforce planning and contingency planning if this does become an issue in your workplace, which it's going to across the board. So I would encourage you to tune in, and it is up on our website right now. If you do a quick search for workplace contingency planning and attendance management for COVID-related issues, we cover things like cross-training your employees, how to plan for flexible work schedules, things like that. So tune in there. It's a little bit too long for me to cover right now during our question period, but you'll get a lot of the information you need there. And if you do need more information, contact us at Business Resources. We're happy to go over it with you and help you make that plan.
I think as we continue to figure out how we're going to live with this new reality, how we're going to live with COVID for the next little while, these are kind of issues that we'll continue to take on, and hopefully we'll get to a better place with. Corinne, a number of people, sort of saying that it's a similar comment to Heather's, that, do dance and fitness studios fall into the hardest hit category of businesses? I keep hearing about restaurants, travel and tourism, but not sure where we fit. And so it depends on the definition. Sometimes what governments use is how much revenue you're still down. Sometimes it's whether, how closed you still have to be. I just want to reassure Heather, and I know you can too, that in our data, we're looking at all the sectors that are hard hit, and we know the ones that are easy to talk about on the radio tend to be travel and tourism and hospitality, but we know there are other categories out there.
Yeah, again, performing arts, I would probably lump it under performing arts, and that has been identified as one of the hardest hit sectors by the government. So I suspect more will come on that front. But you're right. I mean, the definitions of these are going to overlap, and there may be some issues around that, and that we're going to have to make a conscious effort to make sure government remains flexible, because ultimately it really should be around revenue loss, right? And if you've had 0 to no revenue in the last 6 months, it shouldn't matter what sector you're in.
So Megan has a comment on CRA that she ended up having to pay. She asked for relief from the interest, and CRA didn't give them the relief, and sounds like she's had some other struggles with CRA. Megan, I would encourage you to call our helpline if you want to, because we can certainly raise your individual case if you think that's worthwhile. We're happy to do that on your behalf, but that's also very helpful that you shared that, because we will be giving a push to CRA to make sure that they are, or to push them anyway, to be lenient on those interest and penalties in this environment. It makes no sense to me that they would be going after businesses. And I know you have great contacts at CRA, Corinne.
Yes, so please call the helpline and we can do what we can to help out for sure.
Mm-hmm. What other questions do you have, Corinne? I still have lots in my box as well, but
we all do. Yeah. A few, I mean, quite a number, mostly around, again, CEWS loans, when's it going to happen? How we go about getting loan forgiveness. I think that's on the CEWS loan. That's from Elena. And essentially, Elena, you pull out the CEWS loan, and as long as you pay back the remaining amount by the end of 2022, you'll get the amount of loan forgiven. However, if you're talking about the Quebec loan, which you might be, then I'm going to send you a link to that particular Quebec Assistance Loan Program, which may have different rules around it, so you can check it out there. Again, more questions around the Quebec side of things. The red zone funding in Quebec. So Len just asked again about the red zone funding in Quebec. So the red zone funding in Quebec, as I said, is based on the fact that they have these loan programs that have been in place since the beginning of the COVID-19, where people can get up to, I don't know exactly how much, but there's 2 programs. One's for anybody who needs less than 50,000, and one's for people who need more than 50,000. It's a difference when you apply for it. So you have to apply for that loan first. However, if you're in the red zone and you have been shut down, if you have that loan, you can get up to 80% of that loan forgiven, up to $15,000 per month. And so that is, and we're expecting that to continue as long as the businesses are shut down. It's really only meant to be for those red zone businesses that are shut down. And it's something we're pushing all governments who plan to do any further shutdowns. Now, we're also advocating that they limit the shutdowns as much as possible, really target them as much as possible, because we know it's going to have a devastating impact on whoever's affected. But if they have to go there, that they have these types of programs available immediately. And I think the Quebec program sounds a bit more generous than the Ontario one right now, but Ontario is also not facing wholesale cuts or wholesale shutdowns the way they are in Quebec. So hopefully we'll have more provinces sort of raise some of these things so that we can sort of supplement some of what the federal government is doing, especially since they're taking so long to actually introduce some of these programs that could be helpful. So we'll continue to update our website, as Brendan pointed out, with anything new that comes up. And so we'll have the latest and greatest as we learn it, and links up as we learn them, including the Quebec information is up on our website already too.
Brendan, are there additional questions in your box that you'd like to take?
So many. We don't have time for them, but yeah, they just come hot and heavy today. I guess the last one that I'd probably like to address is in regards to what kind of paperwork you need to file on behalf of your employees if they're going to go off sick or need to go get tested. First of all, unless you already have a paid sick day plan in place, as I think Corinne mentioned earlier, this time is not paid for you, by you, excuse me, while the employee is either symptomatic and off quarantining or they're going to get tested. They can access the sickness recovery benefit over this time. And the question is, do I have to issue a record of employment? So the same rules apply basically as existed for CERB, is the employee can access these benefits without your ROE. That said, if your employee does go 7 consecutive days without earning, you're still required to issue an ROE at that point. So to my knowledge, Corinne or Laura, unless you want to correct that, basically there is no requirement unless your employee is going to go a week without consecutive without earnings at that point. Only one I'd like to address right now.
Okay, Corinne, anything else in your box? I know we've all got a lot of questions. I'm
still trying to read them all, to be honest. It's
funny because I felt like this week there's not as much like new, but I guess I think because there's a lot in the holding pen right now in terms of stuff that hasn't been announced, but we expect to be announced soon. There's a lot of questions around.
Well, and I also think with COVID cases increasing and the threat of potential closures, I suspect a lot of you are worried about what comes next. So, we will be here trying to pull and gather and push information as much as we can, because I know it's a scary time right now for lots of folks.
And we do also have a letter going out to all of the, we did a release today and a letter going out to all of governments about the second wave and how challenging the first wave was, but also how, the reserves to deal with this, a big second wave of closures are just not there on the small business side. And so we use some of our latest survey results to get that out. We're also pushing governments to be, in their reporting of the numbers, to provide as much context as possible. There's a big difference between going to your hairdresser where both of you are wearing masks and, he or she is standing behind you and disinfecting between appointments, and, going to a frat party or something like that where everyone's dancing and screaming at each other. So, there's a big difference in the risk profiles of those activities, and we're trying to get governments to make sure that, people have the information they need with which to make good decisions about what they need to do, but and carry on with life as well. Brendan, do we know anything about the Alberta? There was a grant in Alberta for about $5,000 for PPE. Do we know what that program is called by any chance? Caroline is asking that, and you might have that.
Was that grant specific to Alberta, or was that the Canada United grant that was being offered across the country? The only one I'm aware of right now is the Canada United grant, and unfortunately that resource has been tapped. That was well accessed pretty early on. I'm not aware of a provincial specific in Alberta at this point, unfortunately. So, Corinne, any knowledge about that?
No, I was just checking. I had a bit of an update today on significant financial support for businesses, and the only one I have for Alberta is Small and Medium Enterprise Relaunch Grant, which offers 50% of pre-COVID monthly revenue up to $5,000. Nothing specific on PPE as far as I know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I mean, that's definitely one of our asks in Alberta and across all the provinces, of course, is PPE assistance, because so many changes need to be made at this point. So, I mean, that's something in the hopper and something we're pushing for. But as far as I know, yeah, the grant that Corinne just mentioned and the Canada United grant that was in place were the only supports available at this time.
Okay, we've got a couple of helpers on this. It's like phone a friend on these webinars sometimes. So Ryan is saying that it's the Alberta Restart grant, because it was ringing a vague bell with me too. So It's hard to keep track of all of the programs. So Ryan chimed in that it's the Alberta Restart Grant, and then Jordy, who's on from Atlantic, hi Jordy, said it's the Alberta Relaunch Grant. So it's either the Restart Grant or the Relaunch Grant, Carolyn. So look at those two things and we'll see what we can find. I think, Corinne, I'm going to maybe end on this question from Wayne. The concern that I'm sure most of us have is the big cut to the wage subsidy that's hard to deal with no sales increase. And it's certainly what we're seeing in our data is that it's very stubborn, seems to be a very stubborn cliff we're on with the, not cliff, but place we're at with revenue. With revenues where 30% of our members are saying we're back to normal revenues, but that's been flat for, for weeks now, and we expected that needle would be moving faster. As CEWS is going to be extended until next summer, I think we have some expectations with respect to what may happen there. Do you want to comment on that? Because I'm sure a lot of our
yes.
webinar participants.
Yes, it's a good question, which I've had as well, and I have responded to some people one-on-one that we have been pushing, and I did mention in the presentation, we are pushing for them to either stop the decrease that's planned for the wage subsidy in terms of the amount of the subsidy that's going to be provided, and even increase it up to what it was, closer to the 75%. At the very least, bring it back, back to the 1 or the 1.25 multiplier of whatever your revenue loss is now. So we are pushing them to do that. I think there is openness to this because I think there's a recognition that with the second wave or the second sort of whatever we're going through right now is going to have an impact. And I know many businesses are telling us they've seen their revenues go down just in the last 2 or 3 weeks again. So I think it's important for government to recognize that. And since they're going to push it out till next summer anyways, it would make sense to at least slow it down or even stop it at current levels at the very least. So that's definitely high on our radar right now. And it's something that we're hopeful government is going to do. And my sense is that they will. I just don't know at what level it will be sort of maintained over the next several months.
Yeah. And I think the good news, Corinne, is it's fair to say that at this point, governments are listening a little bit more closely to what it is that we are. I think they've kind of learned the hard way that when they don't listen to the advice that they're getting from us, and by us I mean all of us, our members, and you on the webinar, that the programs aren't as well designed as when they do listen to what we say is needed. So I'm definitely feeling that they're picking up the phone more often and really digging into our survey results and really asking, what's going on out there. So hopefully the design that we see on some of this will be better going forward. So again, another just shout out to all of you on the webinar, how important your feedback has been for other business owners as well as these programs get designed and rolled out. And with that, I always hate to call these webinars to a close because we love to, I feel like we could sit here all day and happily answer as many questions as possible. But we know you have things to get to as well. So I'm going to call on Brendan and then Corinne for a few last words, and then I'll wrap us up. Brendan,
perfect. And I do. Yeah, thanks, Laura. And my usual shout out to self-care is really critical at this time as we're kind of on the upswing of that second wave. We continue to push really hard, both on our legislative side as well as our business resources side, to ensure that we've always got your best interest at heart and on our mind. And of course, that comes from feedback from you. So I encourage you on any level, be it responding to surveys or research, or giving us a call in business resources, sending us an email, commenting on Twitter, Facebook, all of those things. Please, please, please reach out to us. You're not alone in this time. We know that we're far from recovered from this pandemic, and we're pushing really, really hard to get all those supports in place for you. And we do support you right now through the business resources line too. So please don't hesitate to give us a shout in any one of those manners that's easiest for you. We're always happy to hear from you.
Thanks, Brendan. And you and your colleagues on the phones are doing a tremendous job of supporting members and getting back as quickly as we can. Corinne?
So thanks again for joining us. I'm always amazed every week how many folks are still joining these webinars, and in fact, it's been growing again recently, and it just tells me how important it is for you to get information, and the fact that there's probably not enough good information out there, which is unfortunate. And part of what we continue to advocate for is for governments to be much more clear in their communications, be much more forthcoming in what's coming, and obviously a lot more clear in how they articulate things. But we're also here to help interpret. That's part of what we do, is in the interpretation between government speak and what it is you actually need to do in order to get what you need to run your business. And we're going to continue to do that. As I always say, your feedback is invaluable in my work. I do a lot of discussions with governments every day, and this absolutely feeds into what I do. And finally, I do want to reiterate something Laura said around our surveys. The government really listens to our surveys now. It's been incredible to see how important they have become. We have been told by multiple sources at all levels of government that it's become the most important tool in order to help them make policy decisions. So I encourage you, if you've never filled out a survey before, to consider doing it, because it is actually being used and it is actually influencing government. So I really encourage you to do that. And if you've already done it, I want to thank you, because it's been absolutely key in pushing governments to do the things that we're trying to get them to do. So thanks again. And I want to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving this coming weekend.
So let me just pick up on a couple of themes from my colleagues and wrap us up. Corinne's absolutely right about the surveys, and we try to make them as simple to fill out. You know, sometimes they, you know, we're always hand-wringing about, you know, is this going to be easy to understand, and is this easy to fill out? And so we really work not to be like a StatsCan survey. And it was funny when I got a comment the other day about how, yeah, StatsCan, you know, has some information, but you guys have all this data that's much timelier. And I'm like, well, we work a little harder than StatsCan to make sure that the surveys are easy to fill out, and where we don't hit the mark, we apologize. But thank you so much for filling those out, because as Corinne said, they're invaluable. And if you haven't, you don't have to fill out every survey, obviously, but if you haven't, if occasionally you click on the link and actually, you know, take the time to answer the questions and make the comments, so valuable. And we've been tweeting out some of the comments anonymously, obviously, of course, but you know, it really does feed the work that we do. And then just to Brendan's point, you know, holidays are coming up, and self-care is, you know, I know for many of us around Thanksgiving, and there's some Jewish holidays coming up, and then we're heading into Christmas. And I think many of us had imagined that we would be out of the pandemic, or more to the other side than we are now. And that for many of us, there's some tough calls around loved ones that are, you know, it's challenging to kind of continue to be creative and reimagine how we have to do things, often without as much family around as we would like. And so, yeah, just take care of yourself. I hope it's a long weekend. Take a breath. It's important. I'll go back to that first comment quote that Corinne found for the first page of the webinar around, you know, if you don't look after yourself, you're no good to anybody else. So, and Brendan often talks about the plane doesn't land without the pilot, and you are the pilot for your businesses, and, you know, at least important part of the crew for your families as well. So, so make sure you are trying to do that in whatever way, shape, or form. I know I get kind of irritated with people actually when they say work on self-care, because I'm like, well, what the heck does that mean when you're really busy and stressed? But, you know, maybe it's just a matter of repeating one of those quotes to yourself, or taking a walk, or going for a coffee at an independent business owner, of course, supporting another independent business owner. Any of those things can kind of put a smile on your face. Find something to laugh at, talk to a friend, whatever small thing that is that can give you a little bit of gas in your tank, because it's important. And with that, I will wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, happy long weekend. Many awful things that are going on in the world, there's still a lot to be grateful for. And it's that time of year where we reflect on that. So with that, we are very grateful for all of you and all of the great work you do every day. And so we will talk to you all again soon. We'll be back again next week, hopefully with some good news. We'll see. if we get anything from the government to be thankful for in the next 24 hours or so before the holiday starts. And with that, we'll sign off. Thanks, Alexa, and we'll end the webinar.